What unpopular opinion do you have? Opinion 1. The work hard and don't give up. Message comment on Reddit post accompanying. Rags to riches stories are damaging lies that imply poverty is most strongly related to lack of effort, which is proven to be both bullshit and demotivating. Here's a picture of someone living in a slum. Now, here's a picture of them 10 years later go to Harvard. How heartwarming. If only every one of those lazy, dirty shits the world over will be more like him. No, more like us. You see, yes, I didn't come from quite that background, but damn it, I've worked very hard for what I've achieved. That's the difference between scum and me. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I've overcome many setbacks in my life, and instead of letting them defeat me, I've used my wits, my grit, and the loving support from my friends and family, who I admit are doing okay and are able to help me, but only because they work hard. I love those Reddit posts. They stop me from feeling guilty about other people's situations, because it'll all work out for those who work hard and never give up, and the rest are lazy subhuman scum who don't deserve any better. Opinion 2. The body positivity movement is a failure, and always will be, because it says that everyone is beautiful, when it should say your worth is not dependent on beauty. Historically, Western women's worth was tied to their beauty because, according to society, their role in life was to attract a good man, marry him, and make him happy. The problem is that even after women started being recognized as equal to men and entered the workforce, their beauty continued to be unjustly tied to their personal worth in a way that's just not true for men. Consider the much harsher standards of physical appearance that female politicians have to endure. The modern body positivity movement reacted to this problem by trying to expand the definition of beautiful and telling everyone that they are attractive. Instead, it should have told women, your attractiveness is irrelevant. Your intelligence, courage, and skill are what matter. I don't worry about my appearance too much besides dating, health, and basic hygiene, and I think my life is better off for it. Expanding the definition of beautiful isn't wrong, but it seems impossible to me. I get that beauty standards are subjective and have changed before, but that evolution has always been organic. I don't think Instagram influencers and activists are going to change people's perceptions of what bodies are beautiful, but they can make a difference by admitting that physical beauty is a worthless goal. Now you might be thinking, body positivity isn't about changing cultural expectations, it's about helping individuals accept themselves. But I'd argue that self-worth is always based, at least to a point, on social feedback. Humans are social creatures, and I am never going to be able to think of myself as attractive if other people, especially the ones I'm attracted to, don't treat me that way. How can you possibly convince someone who's overweight and struggling to find a date that they are just as attractive as a supermodel, when the actions of people around them tell them the exact opposite? You can't. What you can tell them is this: you are not as attractive as a supermodel, but you have other good qualities. To sum up, body positivity asserts that everyone is equally beautiful in their own way, but the truth is that some people are more attractive than others, and that's okay, because your physical beauty doesn't define you. Edit. To clarify, I'm not against body positivity in general. What I'm trying to say is that it is less effective than it could be, and it would be better to acknowledge that attractiveness is pretty much worthless. I'm arguing against the strategy, not the desired outcome. Edit 2. When I say attractiveness is worthless, I mean that it is worthless to society, not to the attractive person. Obviously, being seen as attractive comes with personal advantages, but A, telling people they're attractive does not confer those advantages unless everyone believes you, and B, it does not benefit other people in the same way that intelligence, courage, kindness, or countless other virtues do. Opinion 3. If employers expect a 2-week notice when employees quit, they should give the same courtesy in return when firing someone. I'll start off by saying I don't mean this for major situations where someone needs to be let go right away. If someone is stealing, obviously you don't need to give them a 2-week notice. So, to my point, they always say how it's a professional thing to do when you don't want to burn bridges when leaving a job. They say you should give the 2-week notice and leave on good terms, or that you should be as honest with your employers and give as much heads up as possible so they can properly prepare for your replacement. I know people whose employers have even asked for more than the 2 weeks so that they can train someone new. While I don't disagree with much of this, and do think it is a professional thing to do, I think there is some hypocrisy with it. Your employers need time to prepare for your departure, but if they want to let you go, they can fire you on the spot, leaving you scrambling for a job. The employer can ask you to stay a bit longer, if possible, to train someone, but you don't really get the chance to ask for a courtesy 2 weeks. It puts the importance of a company over the employee. It's saying that an employee should be held to a higher standard than an employer. As an employee, you should be looking out for the good of the company and be a team player. Sometimes there are situations where giving a 2-week notice isn't needed. If you have a terrible employer who you don't think treats you fairly, why do you need to give a 2-week notice? If you feel unappreciated and disrespected, why is it rude not to give notice? If that's the case, then why do people not say the same about employers firing people with no notice? How come that's not rude and unprofessional? Why is that seen as a business move, but giving no notice when quitting is seen as unprofessional? If we're holding employees to a standard, we should hold companies to the same standards. Edit. Thank you for all the responses. I didn't think this would get this large. Clearly, I can't respond to 800 plus comments. I understand everyone's comments regarding safety, and that's a valid point. Just to be clear, I am not in favor of terminating an employee that you think will cause harm and giving them 2 weeks to continue working. I think severance is fair, as others have mentioned it is how it works in their country. However, I agree with the safety issue and why you would give notice. I was more so arguing that if you expect notice, you need to give something similar in return. Opinion 4. Religion has absolutely no place in a modern society. Religion has had some good in the past, when people were absolutely ignorant about the world. It used to be a great tool to answer unsolvable mysteries and guide people who had no idea what the fuck life was about. However, it has also always been about controlling the masses and brainwashing. These poor people constantly living in fear of chastisement by some infinitely powerful being. You better act nice now, or insert your divinity here. Will fuck you up for eternity. Oh, what's that? You guys believe in a different god than us? Looks like it's time for a goddamn bloodbath. But sure, religions are about peace and kindness, unless you don't believe in the right one. Also, I already see you guys coming with the, oh, but don't put all the apples in the same basket. There's some bad religious people, but there are some good ones too. Fuck that, bro. The actions of those bad apples far outweigh the positive aspects of the good ones. Yes, some religious people contribute to charity and stuff, but do you really need religion for that? Can't you just be a good person without it? Also, how is no one calling them cults? It's the same fucking thing. If some nut job claims to be the son of God today, everyone laughs at him and calls him crazy because he is, but sometimes they get a following, and we're all like, well, clearly this is a cult. These people are fucking stupid to believe that this guy is any kind of divinity whatsoever. How many of the ones who laugh at cults are actually religious? I'd bet the fuck into them. But sure, fuck introspection, and let's all be hypocrites. My final point now. Some of you may argue that religion is also about spirituality and trying to better yourself as a person. It's a moral compass. Again, fuck that shit. You don't need a fucking cult leader who's been dead for thousands of years to tell you how to act. We have social norms and things that are acceptable and things that aren't. Just be a fucking adult and reflect on your actions and thoughts, and better yourself that way. Most religious people, as I said earlier, only follow that moral compass to escape imminent doom when they die, not to actually be good people. They do it out of fear, and I don't think that makes you a good person. That makes you a coward who's scared of something non-existent. Religion should and needs to be abolished, but of course that'll never happen. Oh well, TLDR. Religions are about controlling people, have been and always will be a source of violence and hatred. They are cults and need to be abolished. Edit. Just to clarify, I do not wish any harm or hatred toward any religious people, and I am for letting people believe what they want to live and let live. However, I just think religion shouldn't be a part of our society anymore. I am against religion as a concept in a modern society, not against religious people. I know religion was a pillar of humanity in the past. I do not think it is still required today. Opinion 5. If your hamburger/cheeseburger can't fit in my mouth, it's poorly designed. Listen, if I can't just take a bite of the burger you made me without needing to learn origami to get it down to a manageable size, it's not well crafted, defeats the point of the burger, and detracts from the overall dining experience. I don't care if you put Excalibur sticking out the top of it. I shouldn't have to cut it or press it down with the flat of the knife to eat it. I shouldn't have to smush the ingredients and juices to hell and back to get it to fit. As a side note, if you need a toothpick or some such device to hold your toppings in the burger, it's also poorly designed. I didn't come to your restaurant to finish preparing my own meal, make your food edible as presented, or change the recipe. A burger doesn't need to be big to be flavorful. I should be able to enjoy it as is, without a hydraulic press. Edit. I'll clarify that if advertised as such, a massive burger is perfectly acceptable, but if your default cheeseburger, as ordered, comes out on a forklift, you're just wrong. Opinion 6. High school should prepare students to become responsible adults, rather than focusing on college prep. I realize this has probably been done to death, but I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Also, a couple disclaimers. I'm coming from a U.S. perspective, so I apologize if any terms or concepts don't correlate to other cultures. And I graduated from high school 10 years ago, so it could be that high school curriculum has changed since then. I understand why schools focus so much on college prep. In the U.S., college is treated as a requirement, despite the fact that a huge number of people never get a college degree. So many jobs that pay a living wage have the luxury of requiring a bachelor's degree due to the sheer number of applicants, even when a position really doesn't require any advanced education. They can afford to be picky, if only to reduce the applicants to a manageable number. So parents know that for their child to achieve a financially comfortable life, they need to get a college degree. Parents vote for educational leaders who will implement policies aligned with that goal. And when I say college prep, I'm talking about the more specialized classes we take in high school, like chemistry, biology, college algebra, and basically all the AP courses. Of course, all of those teach valuable skills that apply to multiple areas in life. I'm not trying to say that these classes aren't valuable. Consider biology, for example. There are many aspects of biology that are relevant to the average citizen. Things like overall health awareness, understanding common medical procedures like vaccines, how diseases work, and how they spread. The only reason I remember dissecting frogs is because I hated it, and I didn't really learn anything meaningful from it other than the haunting image of what a dissected frog looks like. I suppose you could say it helped me understand how life forms in general work, like how things have organs and blood vessels and systems and such. I just find myself questioning the importance of knowledge like that when there are other things I needed to know that were not taught to me. When I think back to when I graduated high school 10 years ago, I realized that I knew basically nothing about how to be a functioning member of society. School taught me about all of these advanced college-level topics, but I didn't know a single goddamn thing about the following: that I had to pay taxes. I'm serious. I didn't pay my 2012 taxes because I didn't know I was supposed to. I was part-time minimum wage. So don't worry, I don't think the IRS cares. It would have been a refund anyway. So technically I saved the government money. How to calculate my tax bracket. I had to learn this myself when I was self-employed in 2016, and I ended up miscalculating and was $3,000 short in my self-withheld tax savings. I also didn't know that self-employment tax had to be paid quarterly rather than annually, so I had to pay a nice fee for that. how to send a letter. My first landlord actually taught me because that's how he wanted me to send rent checks, how to budget effectively. I spent my first few years of employment living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes being completely out of money days before my next paycheck, when I could have been saving money if I had a budget. How to maximize my savings, things like tax advantage accounts, investing, stocks, how to build and maintain good credit, how to build a resume. I actually learned this in my last year of college. Everyone in the class had no idea. How to apply for jobs effectively, tailoring the resume and application to position, nailing the interview, etc. How to get involved with the local community, town hall meetings, council meetings, boards and commissions, next door, local news, etc. The importance of being politically involved and voting in both local and federal elections. I voted for the first time in 2018. Before that, I just never cared about politics because I didn't keep up with the news at all. Almost anything related to law other than really simple things like don't attack people or driving laws, which I didn't learn in school, technically. I didn't know anything about labor laws, local codes and ordinances, residential laws, my rights when interacting with the police, etc. How the government works, which branches are responsible for what, which elected officials have the power to make what changes, etc. Almost everything related to the home, maintaining the systems and foundation, utilities, how and when to buy a house, etc. I don't think I'm the only one who graduated high school without the above knowledge. But now, as a 28-year-old adult, I don't know how I could function without knowing those things. How could we expect any 18-year-old to become a productive member of society without this knowledge? The only reason I made it is because I had a lot of privilege. Between my supportive parents, friends, other mentors, and the internet, I managed to learn everything I needed to know, but I often had to endure hardships because I didn't know these things when I needed to. In fact, if not for my somewhat natural talent with computers, I don't think I would have been able to learn what I needed to know before it became a very big problem. Many people who support the current curriculum believe that it is the parents' responsibility to teach what I listed above. I will say my parents taught me a lot of important things that allowed me to learn what I needed to learn. For example, how to use computers and the internet effectively. That was hugely important for me. But I guess for me, I just don't think it's right to expect certain things like paying taxes and being politically involved without making sure that the federal education curriculum teaches those skills. Just look at how many young adults end up in prison or homeless because they just don't know how to do basic things like maintain a budget, get a job, communicate effectively, and so on. These people end up being a drain on society, whereas they could be meaningful contributors. I felt cheated when I got out of high school and realized I didn't know any of the things I was expected to know. Again, I don't think things like biology are important, but what does it say about my education when I remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but I don't know anything about paying taxes? It just feels like we got the priorities reversed. There are other things I think high school should teach based on what seem to be many shortcomings of current adults. The most important one, in my opinion, is how to research and evaluate sources effectively. I learned a little bit of this in high school, mainly that Wikipedia doesn't count as a proper source for research papers, but college taught me so much more. Things like how to identify bias, how to evaluate research methods, red flags like spotting whether or not an article lists any sources, or if those sources are credible, diversifying information sources, being aware of my own biases, and not only agreeing with titles that support my preconceived notions. Literally just think about that for a second. How many people read a title that agrees with their bias and just assume it's true? How many people read or hear something delivered very charismatically and assume that they must be telling the truth? This is why there's such a prevalence of conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxers, flat earthers, and so on. If we all understood the basics of fact-checking and how to evaluate credible sources, these things would almost certainly disappear. We would immediately have a better educated society. We would start to see presidential candidates based on merit rather than popularity. This is one of those things that I genuinely think could solve a tremendous number of problems all by itself. High school is supposed to prepare children to become responsible adults. I think rather than hoping that parents should teach life skills and government-mandated responsibilities, the school system that our taxes pay should give us at least a bare minimum of knowledge to do everything an adult is expected to do. Ideally, other life skills like finances and job preparedness should also be taught, and for those who intend to pursue a career that requires higher education, they should have the option to include college prep courses. I don't think someone should be allowed to graduate high school without being taught how to do what is expected of them in adulthood. Edit. Many have made the point that the aforementioned content would likely add at most a semester material, but probably even less than that. As such, I no longer think this content should replace college prep, but rather it should simply be included. I do still believe that some of the more specialized courses such as higher level math, sciences, and so on should be electives for those who intend to pursue relevant fields, especially if the additions I'm proposing could not be added seamlessly. Edit 2. Here's what I have learned or changed my view on so far. I should have clarified that I spent all of my grade school years in private school rather than public school. It's entirely possible that private schools may not be held to the same expectations about their curriculum as public schools, so my experience may not match what those who went to public school experienced. Some of these things I did learn in school, such as the structure of government. I honestly just misspoke there, because what I meant to describe was that I didn't really understand how I was supposed to interact with the government. Same thing with taxes. Of course I understood the overall idea of taxes, but I didn't understand what I needed to do specifically. I knew that a portion of my income had to go to the government, but I wasn't taught that I needed to report it. So when my first job explained that my taxes were automatically withheld, I assumed I didn't have to worry about it. It wasn't until the next year that someone explained to me that I needed to file. As for interacting with the government, I knew about the branches of government, but I didn't understand that we voted for more than just the president. I agree with many who have said that this information in total would likely not require substantial change to curriculum, maybe just some added courses at the most. As such, If I could, I would revise the title such that these concepts were taught in addition to college prep rather than replacing college prep. I would concede that perhaps rather than even a single course with the prevalence of technology and the internet, it may be optimal to impart this information in a concise, easily digestible collection of digital resources. Maybe just brief documents or infographics reminding upcoming graduates of what tasks they will be expected to perform as adults, and other information they can refer to rather than just being tossed in the pool and told to swim. With the internet, they could easily look up the details when needed. Edit 3. Some final reflections. I originally intended to reply to every comment, but there are far too many responses at this point for me to even try that. In retrospect, I regret using rather than in the title. I think it created an unnecessary focus on defending specialized subjects. The reality is that I enjoyed nearly all of the advanced courses I took. I should have been more careful with my wording, because honestly the true feeling I had was that these life skills should be considered more of a requirement than they are. Many people brought up courses like civics and home economics, which my school didn't offer, not even as electives. However, I seem to be in the minority with that experience. Even so, it doesn't change my belief that those courses should be required, not electives. Despite what some have assumed/implied about me in this thread, I'm actually a pretty smart person. I was very successful in both high school and college, and now in my career. I had a 3.9 in high school IRC, somewhat embarrassingly, a 3.1 in college, but that was mainly because I figured out what career I want to pursue, and it didn't require higher education. So I lost motivation to keep my grades up in the last 2 years. I was one of the only people to make an A in Calculus 2, for whatever that's worth. I should have been more clear in the original post about my understanding of taxes and writing letters. Many people thought that I didn't have any awareness of taxes at all, and of course that's not the case. I feel like this became a point many people dwelled on, rather than spending time on other points. And many pointed out that letters were taught in elementary school, but I genuinely don't remember learning it, and I just never needed to send any letters growing up. I set up my first email account in 1999 when I was 7 years old, so I sent most of my messages via email rather than sending letters. To be fair, some of the issues like sending letters are really not that big of a deal. It was honestly a bad example. I was just trying to be thorough and got carried away. And I definitely did learn about the structure of the federal government in school, maybe also state government, but I don't recall learning anything about county or local governments. There seemed to be a fundamental debate underneath all of this in the form of what schools and parents ought to teach respectively. I didn't expect how divided many of the opinions would be on this issue, but I feel that the arguments were very instructive and meaningful. I think many people oversimplified the issue by saying that all of these things could be figured out in a Google search or YouTube video. Of course, that's true, but if you don't know what's required of you, you won't know to look it up until you're already in trouble. Some brought up that these moments of messing up and then doing the research are part of learning in the real world, and I suppose I can't really dispute that. I just don't think it's unreasonable to give students some easily digestible information for the common things they'll likely need to know as adults, and if I had been given that information, it would have saved me a lot of trouble. Many brought up that high school students won't care or listen anyway. I mean, sure, but those students aren't paying attention in other classes either, yet we still require those. We can't force students to pay attention, but we can at least make sure the information is made available to them. Overall, this thread has been very interesting. I've got a lot to think about for sure. Opinion 7. Cashiers should never be forced to stand if it's not necessary for their job. Cashiers are rarely allowed to sit in grocery stores and other retail jobs. Sitting might sometimes affect the ability to perform certain tasks, but cashiers can stand for these if needed. But in my experience, most cashier duties involve scanning, hitting buttons, and putting things in bags. All of these can be performed while sitting. I believe there are work culture reasons for requiring cashiers to stand that are not based on their ability to perform their job, but based on the perception of being less alert or, at worst, lazy. I do not think most customers care about these perceptions as much as managers and corporate leaders think they do. Not all cashiers will care about this, but there are enough cashiers who would greatly benefit from being allowed to sit for health reasons and for morale reasons. Edit. I'm still reading responses and will address or award as much as I can. I tend to give out deltas like candy, but so far, I haven't seen anything even a little compelling. Opinion 8. People who have been wrongfully imprisoned should automatically be compensated for their time in prison to such an extent that they can live a comfortable lifestyle. The main focus of my stance is people who have served long sentences for serious crimes, such as those wrongfully convicted of murder or rape and released decades after their conviction, although I would also support some form of compensation for lesser sentences for lesser crimes. But the main focus of the CMB, subreddit changed my view, should be those convicted of major crimes such as murder who have spent many years in prison before their release. One concept we have in American justice is the idea that someone who is sent to prison is paying their debt to society. The premise behind this is that a crime causes harm to society as a whole, and having the criminal give up his or her quality of life for some time balances the scales. If said person faced the same punishment without actually owing that debt, then the reverse must be true. Society owes them a debt, since it is impossible to give them extra years of life. The next best thing is to make the remaining years they have left as good as possible, and financial compensation is the best way to do that. The job market can be hard enough for anyone, let alone someone with a huge gap in their employment history. Even if it is understood that the conviction was reversed, there may be some employers who are prejudiced against that person. Maybe they feel that it's possible they were actually guilty and don't want to hire them. Even without such prejudice, it's hard to imagine a scenario in which a person with 15 years of experience would not get a job over someone who had 15 years of no work experience because they were in prison, except in cases where an employer simply wants to be charitable. Finally, there's the concept of time away from life itself. Think about the things that you enjoy, the things that make life worth living, whether that be time with friends, family, traveling, going to concerts, or simply taking a walk outside. Imagine having years taken from your life where you couldn't do these things. Most people spend a large portion of their waking hours working to sustain a lifestyle that allows these experiences in their free time. I spend time away from my wife at work so that the time I do get to spend with her after work and on weekends is enjoyable, and so that we have necessities such as food and shelter. Someone who's been wrongfully imprisoned shouldn't have to spend their remaining time doing anything other than trying to make up for lost time. They should be able to spend every day with their family and friends, relaxing, and doing the things most of us hope to do in retirement. But maybe there's something I missed. If you feel differently, see if you can change my view. Opinion 9. Religious American conservatives and right-wingers' obsession with capitalism and other American values is incompatible with their nearly fundamentalist take on Christianity. I'm going to focus on some key principles that I think are important in Christianity, but are basically ignored by some religious American conservatives when they argue against things like healthcare, welfare, immigration, or when they argue in favor of guns, military intervention, and death penalty, or punishment in general. I'm genuinely interested in how the worldview of these people works. The main thing I base my assumptions on is a commonly accepted understanding of Jesus himself, how he is characterized, and how he is supposed to be a role model for Christians. Everyone knows that he is supposed to be kind, peaceful, selfless, altruistic, helpful to others, and not interested in financial gain or profit. I believe he was even quoted as saying something along the lines of, "Don't worship money." So then, if you praise this person, act like you live according to standards, why would you be so obsessed with attacking every government program that is about helping poor people? They not only reject any step in that direction, they enthusiastically argue against it. How can you justify the everyone is on their own attitude, where people who get sick either die or become homeless because of hospital bills, and then blame them for their life choices instead of trying to create a system that would help them? Even if it meant that some amount of the money you work for would go to somebody else, shouldn't you, as a religious person, be okay with that? Wouldn't that fit the narrative of trying to do the noble thing? Another issue is the tribalism you find in these communities, where there is prejudice and skepticism toward non-white immigrants coming into the country. Not only would helping immigrants seeking a better life be something that Jesus would probably support, but Jesus himself probably was not white. He was Middle Eastern. So, how do they justify their narrow focus on people with European ancestry when their own role model did not fit that description? The next topic is their stance on guns and military intervention. I assume that Jesus would have been a pacifist. So why do you almost never hear these people complain about military spending and all the interventions the United States has carried out? Do they think Jesus would have supported wars like Vietnam or coups in South America? Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, they are mostly supportive of U.S. military operations and are very skeptical of people who criticize anything related to the troops, right? And what is with the obsession with guns in their culture? Do they think Jesus would have been a gun enthusiast and an NRA supporter? That he would happily talk about how home invaders deserve immediate death and how important these weapons are, even though their primary purpose is to injure or kill, regardless of how you judge home invasion situations? I think that as a religious person, you should not be enthusiastic about killing, no matter how justified you think it is. The way some people talk about this, with such a merciless attitude, as if they are just waiting for an excuse to shoot someone, feels completely opposite to Christianity. My last point is their stance toward punishment and the death penalty. The contradiction regarding the death penalty seems obvious, but even the punishment over rehabilitation mindset feels wrong. Do you really think that, for example, Jesus as a judge would support locking someone up for as long as possible for stealing instead of trying to rehabilitate them? Why would you, as a Christian, choose revenge over forgiveness? I'm not even Christian, and it seems obvious to me which approach would align more closely with Christianity. So why don't these people see it? In summary, I believe that these people don't really care about Christianity consistently. They use it when it benefits them, but abandon it when it conflicts with their American narrative. In my opinion, the contradictions are too large to ignore. So either they're intentionally ignoring them or they don't truly believe in Christianity in the way they claim to. Removing TV episodes or movies from streaming because of racist content does nothing to combat racism and only serves to shield the creator's brand. This is something that I would actually like to change my mind about, but I just can't bring myself to because I really don't understand it. This was sparked by the removal of a few episodes of 30 Rock and the Golden Girls from streaming platforms. I don't really care about what happened with Gone with the Wind. I think they actually handled that correctly by adding a disclaimer instead of removing the film altogether. This country has a long and pervasive history of racist media. We all recognize this. We likely haven't seen the end of racist media either. It's probably going to happen again with something very popular in the future. Those episodes of 30 Rock aired, were loved by millions of people, won Emmy Awards, and were racist. We can't ignore that. Removing them from digital platforms feels more like an attempt to protect Tina Fey, Robert Carlock, and Jane Krakowski than it does an actual constructive effort to improve media. The episodes should remain available so the public can see what the creators did and recognize how they contributed to racist media. Putting a disclaimer or content warning on the episode will be a much better way to communicate that perspectives have changed over time. Or, if they are really that ashamed of the content, take the entire show down. By removing select racist episodes while allowing the rest of the show to stay available, Tina Fey is still continuing to profit from 30 Rock's legacy, a legacy that was partly built using racist material. Allowing people to enjoy and support 30 Rock without acknowledging its racist history feels like an attempt to shield future fans from discomfort and reassure them that their favorite show is not actually problematic. That doesn't seem productive either for the audience or for the people hurt by the content. Edit. You all actually changed my view. While I do think there should be a legal way to access these episodes digitally for the sake of transparency, it should probably exist only for research purposes. The episode should be removed from mainstream circulation because the risk of people seeing and absorbing the underlying ideas is too high. I sometimes forget that new people discover shows like 30 Rock every day and may not question the content critically. End of edit. The biggest issue facing the LGBTQ community is itself, and it's full of toxic, non-inclusive, insecure people who gatekeep personality and sexuality. I'm a bisexual man who tends to lean more toward guys, and in the past few days I can recount multiple separate negative interactions I've had with other gay guys and girls. Obviously, this is a small sample size, but I've had more negative experiences with LGBTQ people than positive ones. As I've been an open member of this community for more than a year and have made many gay friends and acquaintances, I feel I have fair grounds to comment on its toxicity. These are the 3 most recent experiences I've had, and the issues I have with them. Extreme body shaming and bullying, this is a big one. I've suffered from anorexia in my life, and am currently 6 feet 3 inches, muscular, and sitting at around 210 pounds. I was in a Discord call with a couple people for a League Clash game tonight, one of them being gay, and we started posting pictures of ourselves comparing ourselves to League of Legends champions. Due to my hairstyle, I posted a picture of myself next to Set. I was immediately told by the gay guy that I looked nothing like Set Daddy, and was called fat, and told to tone up and drop some more pounds. At this point I wasn't offended. So I informed him that I used to weigh 300 pounds with no muscle until I was bullied into developing anorexia, and that I only recovered around 6 months ago. His response was, "Should have kept going. You aren't anywhere near a snack right now." That cut pretty deep, especially when the community constantly preaches inclusivity. Apparently I'm a fake gay if I'm bisexual, and I'm not allowed to be straight acting. An acquaintance I know in real life noticed an LGBT flag hanging in the background of my room during a Zoom meeting. She exclaimed, "Oh my God, I had no idea you were gay," and I clarified, "Well, actually no, I'm bisexual." I was then bombarded with accusations of cultural appropriation and sympathy-seeking because I was clearly a straight man based on how I act. Again, it seems odd for a community that is supposed to be all-inclusive to judge me for how I act and who I love. Extreme sexualization, and treating being gay like a personality trait. During the same Clash game, for first example, one of my close friends had his 8-year-old little brother in the room and was playing League on speakers because he had to watch him. The gay guy died in lane and started moaning and saying things like, "This Rengar just destroyed my boy pussy," and other comments like that. My friend told him to stop because his little brother was in the room, and the gay guy immediately called my friend a homophobic loser and said he was probably closeted and should come over and try some boy pussy. At that point, my friend left the call, and the guy continued making extremely over-sexualized comments during a video game. There's a fine line between being yourself and just being so vulgar that your presence makes a group of 20-year-olds uncomfortable. As I've said, these aren't one-time occurrences. Similar situations to the ones above have happened at least half a dozen times each to me personally from different people. I can't say I'm proud to be part of a community that often feels built entirely around drama, sex, and appearance. Opinion 12. The Big Bang Theory is the worst popular TV show of the last 20 years, at least. This may seem subjective, but I think there are enough objective reasons why The Big Bang Theory, BBT, is terrible. For some reference, here is a list of some very highly rated TV shows in the past couple of decades. Deadwood, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Some genuinely high-quality stuff. Quality, obviously, is not always directly reflected in ratings. However, in terms of popularity and viewership, BBT was consistently one of the top programs of the year, occasionally behind the Super Bowl and a few other football events. And that continued well into its 12-year run, 7, 8, even 10 years in. Establishing BBT's popularity is easy and objective. How do you demonstrate its terribleness? In my opinion, the show is not funny at all, but it is objectively offensive and insulting to basically everyone. Not only that, but there is no character growth, mainly because the characters themselves are designed to be shallow caricatures in the first place. Attractive people are portrayed as dumb and promiscuous. Smart people are awkward weirdos who creep out women, and smart women are portrayed as frumpy weirdos. Let's go through the cast real quick. Penny doesn't even have a last name. She is attractive and therefore portrayed as dumb and promiscuous. She has almost no personality, and once a relationship with Leonard is established, she becomes nothing but an obnoxious complainer who hates everything. Leonard. He is short and smart, therefore weird and awkward. He is obsessed with the girl next door because she is hot and for no other reason. He is a complete doormat for Sheldon, yet for some reason he keeps enabling him. Sheldon, a complete nightmare of a human being. He is very clearly coded as autistic, but it is all played for laughs. No reasonable person would maintain a relationship of any kind with him. Yet somehow he keeps 7 people wrapped around his finger by acting like a child. Howard, smart, therefore creepy weirdo. He is actually the only character who gets a little bit of an arc, which I'll get to later. Raj, smart, therefore another creepy weirdo. So awkward around women that he literally cannot speak to them until he drinks alcohol. This continues until the writers realize the show is becoming more popular and decide they need more female characters. So they basically cure him. Amy, smart, therefore frumpy weirdo. She comes out of her shell a little, but never truly develops. Bernadette has a PhD, so she must be smart. She is written as controlling and mean, despite also being attractive. Stuart, not particularly smart, but likes comic books, so he is also portrayed as a creepy weirdo. So the show has a character or personality trait portrayed negatively that can offend, or at least insult basically everyone. Attractive women, smart people, dumb people, men, women, nerds, geeks, autistic people, and so on. Try not to make this too long, but let's talk character arcs. Spoiler, the show barely has any. Sheldon remains his horrible, abusive self despite getting married and having sex. Leonard is still an obnoxious winner obsessed with a woman he has nothing in common with. Penny is still a shallow narcissist. Amy is still awkward. She just talks more about having friends and sex. Bernadette remains mean and controlling, and Raj remains a creepy weirdo. As I mentioned, Howard gets a little bit of development because he becomes slightly more mature after getting married. But even that is a very flat arc compared to the development in a show like Breaking Bad, and you see how pathetic it is that 12 seasons of BBT result in almost zero meaningful character growth. A relatively minor point, but I'll mention it anyway. All the relationships are terrible. Sheldon constantly mistreats Amy. Penny and Leonard have nothing in common, and spend most of their time complaining about each other to their friends. Howard and Bernadette argue constantly, barely communicate, and also seem fundamentally incompatible. Final point, the show is not funny. This is hard to prove objectively. But when I watch my favorite comedies like 30 Rock, Parks and Recreation, The Office, Scrubs, Archer, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, The IT Crowd, South Park, Letterkenny, or The Venture Brothers, I laugh out loud multiple times per episode even after watching them repeatedly. I have seen most episodes of BBT through around season 10, over 200 episodes total, and I genuinely laugh maybe 5 or 6 times overall. Watch one of the no-laugh track edits online, and you'll notice that most of the humor is just characters saying random things, and then pausing for audience laughter. Compare that to genuinely funny shows, which usually do not need a laugh track, and you'll see that BBT simply is not funny. TLDR, The Big Bang Theory is not funny, has shallow and offensive characters, yet became incredibly popular. Either convince me that it is actually good, or that there's another popular show that was even worse. Edit. What is going on with the links? Edit 2. I should have specified that I'm only talking about scripted shows, because reality TV is by definition complete trash. While no reality show is as popular as BBT, plenty are just as bad. Opinion 13. Unpaid internships contribute to class barriers in society and should be illegal. The concept behind unpaid internships sounds good. Work for free, but gain valuable work experience or an opportunity for a job. But here's the problem. Since you are not being paid, you either already have enough money ahead of time or work a second job to support yourself. This creates a built-in inequality between interns from poor backgrounds and interns from privileged backgrounds. Interns from poor backgrounds have to spend energy working a second job, while privileged interns who already have financial support do not. They can instead put all of that time and energy into their internship. We already know that having connections helps, but the effect becomes even worse when you need those same connections to get an unpaid internship that only people with money or support can realistically afford in the first place. How is someone from a poor background supposed to have a fair chance at those opportunities? Opinion 14. Making students read Shakespeare and other difficult or boring books causes students to hate reading. If they were made to read more exciting, interesting, and relevant books, students would look forward to reading rather than rejecting books entirely. When I was in high school, I was made to read books like Romeo and Juliet. These books were incredibly boring and very difficult to read. Every sentence felt like it needed to be deciphered. As someone who loved reading books like Harry Potter and The Lord of the Rings, this did not affect me too much. I struggled through the books, reports, and assignments like everyone else and got my grade. But I still loved reading. Most of my classmates, however, did not handle it so well. They hated the reading, hated the assignments, and hated everything about it simply because the material was old and difficult to understand. I believe that many kids hate reading because their only experience with reading in school involves books from centuries ago. To add to this, because I was such an avid reader, my 11th grade English teacher let me read independently during class instead of doing regular assignments. She said she could not really teach me much more because I was already far ahead of everyone else. She even let me go into the teacher's library to look through all the classroom book sets. And there I saw around 200 brand new copies of The Lord of the Rings, including The Hobbit. Completely confused, I asked her why we never got to read those books. Her reply was, "Those books are English literature. We only read American literature. Why are we focusing on who wrote the book? Is it far more important that kids learn how to read? And more importantly, learn to enjoy reading? Why does it matter more that Shakespeare revolutionized writing than giving students books they will actually connect with?" Sorry for the wall of text. Edit. I realize that Shakespeare is not American literature. However, that was the explanation I was given at the time, and I did not really question it back then. Opinion 15. People who object to donating their organs after they die should be placed at the bottom of the list when it comes to receiving an organ. I frequently hear about people who do not want to donate their organs after death because of religious reasons or simply because it feels creepy. The same goes for people refusing to donate the organs of close relatives who left no clear instructions. The thought of having your organs removed may feel disturbing, and agreeing to removal of a loved one's organs may feel even worse. But if you cannot come to terms with that, then you should not have a right to benefit from other people making that difficult and mature decision. The same applies if your religion forbids organ donation. If your beliefs are more important to you than saving one or several lives, then your faith should also protect you from organ failure. Minors should, of course, be exempt. They should receive organs regardless of the decisions made by their parents. Obviously, organs should not go to waste if there is no deserving recipient available. But organs should only go to non-donors if there are no compatible recipient available who would have donated their own organs. Edit. Thank you all for the respectful discussion. Unfortunately, I have to get up for work in 5 hours, so I need to sleep. I'll come back tomorrow and try to respond to as many people as possible. Good night. Edit 2. I have now spent far more time on this post than I ever expected, and I want to thank everyone again for sharing their thoughts. I have definitely learned a lot about several aspects of this topic. Although my overall view has not changed, there are many things I still need to think about. Opinion 16. There is no way to be a responsible cat owner while letting your cat free roam outdoors. This is an opinion I've had for a while and have tried to discuss with people who support outdoor cats. I like to think most topics are nuanced, which is why I'm posting this here, but I really struggle to see much nuance with this one. Here is my reasoning, and I'll try to outline the arguments I've heard that do not, and probably will not, convince me otherwise. Cats are a domesticated species. I hear people say they are half wild, less domesticated, and so on, but the type of cat humans keep as pets is literally a unique domesticated species. They depend on us for food, shelter, and healthcare. Feral cats obviously exist, but their quality of life is generally much worse. Going off point 1, cats are not a natural species in most parts of the world. When allowed outdoors, they are an invasive species. Most wildlife has not had enough time to evolve alongside exposure to cats, and as a result, cats continue to pose a huge threat to wildlife. In New Zealand, for example, cats are responsible for the extinction of 6 bird species and many other wildlife species. From a purely ecological standpoint, it is extremely irresponsible to allow an invasive predator to freely hunt where you live, especially considering that cats often hunt and kill for fun, even when they are well-fed and wearing collars with bells. Outdoor cats are exposed to countless threats. Just to name a few: dogs, other cats, raccoons, hawks, owls, skunks, foxes, cars, cruel humans, traps, rat poison, toxic plants, disease, and more. Even if your specific region does not have 1 or 2 of these threats, there is nowhere people live that is completely free of danger for cats. As a pet owner, your responsibility is to provide a safe and healthy environment for them. Letting them free roam exposes them to all kinds of risks involving injury, disease, and death. Outdoor cats also have a lower life expectancy than indoor cats. There are plenty of ways to provide enrichment indoors or give cats safe, supervised outdoor time, such as KDOs, leash walks, and supervised yard time, without compromising their health and well-being. I am not advocating for locking them inside with nothing to do. I think cats absolutely need playtime and stimulation, but I think people take the easy route by letting them roam freely, and that it is lazy and irresponsible for all the reasons above. Dogs also need enrichment and outdoor time, but for the most part we do not allow them to freely roam neighborhoods and cities the way we do with cats. I think many people see cats as low-maintenance pets that need little from their owners, which contributes to neglect and poor welfare. Instead of challenging those assumptions, people keep putting cats outside in the name of letting them enjoy themselves. I should also add that this post is not about barn cats. I have separate criticisms of that situation as well, but this discussion is specifically about pet cats. CMV? I know I laid out a lot here, but I am genuinely interested in hearing arguments that have real merit. Edit. To clarify a couple points, I am specifically talking about free roaming outdoors, not things like letting your cat sit on the porch for a few minutes, supervised outdoor time, and similar situations. I am less interested in arguments that focus on one specific risk, and more interested in hearing reasons why letting cats free roam is considered responsible. Edit 2. Thank you for all the replies. Unfortunately, I am still struggling to see any argument that has genuinely changed or expanded my view in a meaningful way. There are a lot of responses here, and I probably will not be able to reply to all of them, but I am especially interested in hearing arguments for why free roaming itself is responsible. Edit 3. Please read before commenting. Thanks again to everyone who took the time to leave thoughtful responses. Although my view has not really changed, I do appreciate everyone who genuinely engaged with the topic. This post received a much bigger response than I ever expected, and I will not be able to get to everyone because of the sheer number of comments, over 1.6 thousand at this point. Thank you for the awards as well. I encourage people who are interested to read through the replies, but if you still want to comment, please focus specifically on arguments for why it is responsible to let cats free roam. That is the core point I hope to explore further. I probably will not respond if your comment repeats the same point dozens of others have already made. Opinion 17. All public restrooms that contain only a single toilet should be gender neutral. I was discussing this with a friend of mine when we were at an ice cream parlor. The place had a male restroom and a female restroom, but both only contained a single toilet and sink, meaning they could only be used by one person at a time anyway, aside from small children needing help from a parent. Both she and I saw no reason for them to be labeled separately, and we could not think of any negative effects that would come from making them gender neutral. But I might be wrong. I am only looking at this from my own limited perspective. So, aside from legal reasons, why should restrooms like this remain gendered? Opinion 18. You do not have to be white to be racist, but society often ignores racism from people who are not white. Pretty much what the title says. Society sometimes acts as if only white people can be racist. I have seen memes online that are directly racist toward white people. For example, there is a meme of a confused black man reading a newspaper, captioned "white people" under a description of something strange a white person supposedly did or said. I understand that this view may sound offensive on the surface, but answer me this. Do we solve racism with more racism? I do not think so. Racism should be addressed by supporting equal rights for minorities and working together so everyone has equal opportunity, regardless of race. That goal becomes harder to achieve when casual jokes targeting white people are treated as acceptable. Imagine if the example I gave in the first paragraph were reversed. Imagine a confused white man reading a newspaper with the caption "black people." I seriously doubt people would react well to that. Again, I ask, do we solve racism with more racism? I am open to discussion and willing to change my view if presented with solid reasoning and evidence. Edit. Thanks for all the different perspectives. I think my view has changed somewhat, although it has become more complicated rather than clearer. Please continue the discussion. I genuinely enjoy conversations like this. Edit 2. I am from the United States. Sorry for not clarifying that earlier. You do not have to be white to be racist, but society often ignores racism from people who are not white. Pretty much what the title says. Society sometimes acts as if only white people can be racist. I have seen memes online that are directly racist toward white people. For example, there's a meme of a confused black man reading a newspaper, captioned white people under a description of something strange a white person supposedly did or said. I understand that this view may sound offensive on the surface, but answer me this. Do we solve racism with more racism? I do not think so. Racism should be addressed by supporting equal rights for minorities and working together so everyone has equal opportunity, regardless of race. That goal becomes harder to achieve when casual jokes targeting white people are treated as acceptable. Imagine if the example I gave in the first paragraph were reversed. Imagine a confused white man reading a newspaper with the caption black people. I seriously doubt people would react well to that. Again, I ask, do we solve racism with more racism? I am open to discussion and willing to change my view if presented with solid reasoning and evidence. Edit. Thanks for all the different perspectives. I think my view has changed somewhat, although it has become more complicated rather than clearer. Please continue the discussion. I genuinely enjoy conversations like this. Edit 2. I am from the United States. Sorry for not clarifying that earlier. Opinion 19. Being in the military doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a strong arm enforcer of corporate interests. I am a military veteran. I served during the Vietnam War. I see nothing heroic in military service. I mostly see kids from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds joining the military to escape dead-end lives. And the military offers that there is no doubt. I served, and I'm glad I did. The service helped me out of poverty, but I had no illusions about who and what I was serving. We haven't been involved in an existential war since the 1940s. Most of our actions after that, and many before, have been about protecting and promoting American corporate hegemony. We want compliant trading partners. That's it. If you are in the military, your job is to keep the system running. You don't protect ordinary Americans. You protect American business interests abroad. Answer 20. There should be a maximum age to run for president. In the USA, we have a minimum age of 35 to run for president. Although I object to that exact number, I understand the reason behind it. Namely, that someone may be too inexperienced or uninformed to lead effectively. I think the same logic, if not even more so, should apply to a maximum age as well. Using Joe Biden as an example, the man is 34 years older than the median age of the state with the highest median age in country, Maine at 43. At best, that's close to double the median age. There is effectively no way that he or any much older candidate can truly stay in touch with the issues facing most of the country. This divide will only grow larger over time as rapid advances in technology create bigger gaps in understanding between generations. Beyond that, there are more practical concerns, such as the possibility of dying in office due to old age. Again, using Biden as an example, he is less than a year and a half away from the average life expectancy for men in the USA. Obviously, someone in his position likely has access to better healthcare than the average person, but still, it's the White House, not a nursing home. Almost nobody in their 60s or 70s performs mentally or physically as well as they did in their 40s or 50s. And the country shouldn't have to undergo a sudden transition of power because a geriatric politician decided to run for office in his final years. I don't see any practical advantage to having a candidate over, say, 60 years old. Experience in politics is valuable, but not when most of that experience comes from a world that no longer exists in the same way. Opinion 21. Opinion 21. Female nudity in TV and films is almost always unnecessary and serves no purpose beyond functioning as softcore porn. I came across a clip of an actress I had been looking up. She's relatively unknown, and I was surprised to see that she had done nude scenes on camera. I'm not going to link the scene. In that scene, and in many others I've seen, the characters are in a hurry and having a conversation that could just as easily happen over a cup of coffee. It seems to me that nudity only has a meaningful role when the human body is presented naturally and without sexualization. That creates limited opportunities. But when nudity is used in a sexual context, it either comes across as outright smut or requires story-related dialogue to stop the scene from feeling like smut. Either way, and I mean specifically in sexual settings, I don't see what explicit nudity contributes beyond titillation. We already know that actors in mainstream films are usually not actually having sex. So what difference does it make if the actress exposes her full body or not? And we constantly hear stories about actresses being pressured into showing more of their bodies than they wanted to. I often hear actresses say, I don't mind showing my body if the role truly requires it. But is there ever really a necessary scene that isn't mainly there for viewers who want to see the actress naked? Edit. Thank you for all your comments. I'm trying to reply to as many as I can. To clarify my original point, nudity in a non-erotic context, when it is not exploitive, when it adds to the story, or when it is simply part of a character's normal life, does not bother me. Graphic nudity in sexual scenes often feels gratuitous and adds nothing meaningful to the story. Opinion 22. Smokers who smoke in public are selfish and ultimately don't consider other people's health problems. Edit. Wow. I never expected such a huge response to this, nor have I ever posted anything that went even slightly viral. I'll never have enough time to respond to 500 plus comments, but I do think my argument was flawed in some ways. I wasn't fully aware that smokers often have limited places where they're allowed to smoke, and I didn't really consider their perspective. I also agree with many of the comparisons people made regarding perfumes, body odor, loud noises, and similar annoyances. However, I would argue that those things are usually minor inconveniences, whereas my physical reaction to cigarette smoke is much more severe. Still, I understand now that I'm probably in a minority on that point. Thank you to everyone who took the time to educate me a bit more, and I'm sorry I can't go through that many replies. We're all just trying to do our best, and I recognize now that I wasn't being very respectful of that. For the past 3 years, I've been living in a city with a high percentage of cigarette smokers. While many people respectfully smoke in designated areas, there are still a lot of smokers who light up while walking down sidewalks, standing near building entrances, or staying in other places where non-smokers can avoid the smoke. It makes me wonder, are they aware that their smoke travels and enters the lungs of strangers nearby without consent? Do they understand how uncomfortable it can be for a non-smoker with asthma to breathe in that toxic air with no real choice? Their decision to inhale poison somehow becomes my problem as well. Even riding in a car that smells like cigarette smoke can make me feel physically sick. I'm trying to approach this from a more compassionate perspective, but the truth is that we all share the same air. As someone who struggles with vocal cord issues and other lung-related conditions, secondhand smoke in public spaces genuinely affects me. It makes me feel that many smokers are not fully aware of how their actions impact the people around them. Smoke spreads. It harms our lungs, and it harms the environment. I'd honestly like to better understand the perspective of smokers, whether they fully realize these effects, and maybe learn how I can support friends who want to quit. Opinion 23. When I buy a physical copy of a book, I should have the option to purchase the audiobook at a significant discount. I prefer reading books rather than listening to them. I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing a book on my shelf and being able to easily go back and reread an excerpt when needed. A bookshelf and its contents can also be a great conversation piece. Because of that, I usually don't buy audiobooks. However, there are certain situations where I would really enjoy having the audiobook version as well, but paying full price for both the physical copy and the audiobook feels unreasonable. I believe many people feel the same way and can't justify buying the same book twice. I have to assume that most of the publisher's investment in creating an audiobook comes from recording and editing it once the audiobook is completed. There probably are not many additional costs involved. I already bought your book to read. I would happily pay a few extra dollars at the time of purchase to also have access to the audiobook version. I don't like assuming that I know more than publishing companies that literally specialize in this industry. So please tell me why I'm wrong to think this could be a win-win situation for everyone involved. Edit. It appears that there are different structures related to audiobook profit sharing under royalty-based systems, where some combination of the publisher, author, and narrator receives percentage of each sale. I can understand why offering the audiobook at a steep discount may not be beneficial. However, there are publishers that do not use this structure, and I still believe it could be in their best interest to offer a discount. Edit 2. How are you going to stop people from buying a physical and audio bundle at the lower price and then reselling one of them? U/Chew83RT raised this point, and it created a major problem with my argument. Any possible rebuttals would be appreciated. Edit 3. See U/Axios14's comment for a possible solution to the issue raised by U/Chew83RT above. Edit 4. I'm getting a lot of comments suggesting that this idea is somehow an attempt to rip off audiobook narrators, authors, and others involved, or that I don't value the work narrators do. That is not my intention. As I said in the original post, I'm simply considering whether this pricing structure could create a win-win situation for both consumers and the people involved in publishing the physical and audio versions of a book. Edit 5. I could have been clearer in the original post. I'm not suggesting that publishers should be required to offer audiobooks at a discount. I'm simply questioning whether this kind of pricing structure could benefit both consumers and publishers. Opinion 23. When I buy a physical copy of a book, I should have the option to purchase the audiobook at a significant discount. I prefer reading books rather than listening to them. I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing a book on my shelf and being able to easily go back and reread an excerpt when needed. A bookshelf and its contents can also be a great conversation piece. Because of that, I usually don't buy audiobooks. However, there are certain situations where I would really enjoy having the audiobook version as well, but paying full price for both the physical copy and the audiobook feels unreasonable. I believe many people feel the same way and can't justify buying the same book twice. I have to assume that most of the publisher's investment in creating an audiobook comes from recording and editing it. Once the audiobook is completed, there probably are not many additional costs involved. I already bought your book to read. I would happily pay a few extra dollars at the time of purchase to also have access to the audiobook version. I don't like assuming that I know more than publishing companies that literally specialize in this industry. So please tell me why I'm wrong to think this could be a win-win situation for everyone involved. Edit. It appears that there are different structures related to audiobook profit sharing under royalty-based systems, where some combination of the publisher, author, and narrator receives percentage of each sale. I can understand why offering an audiobook at a steep discount may not be beneficial. However, there are publishers that do not use the structure, and I still believe it could be in their best interest to offer a discount. Edit 2. How are you going to stop people from buying the physical and audio bundle at the lower price and then reselling one of them? U/Chew83RT raised this point, and it creates a major problem with my argument. Any possible rebuttals would be appreciated. Edit 3. See U/Axios14's comment for a possible solution to the issue raised by U/Chew83RT above. Edit 4. I'm getting a lot of comments suggesting that this idea is somehow an attempt to rip off audiobook narrators, authors, and others involved, or that I don't value the work narrators do. That is not my intention. As I said in the original post, I'm simply considering whether this pricing structure could create a win-win situation for both consumers and the people involved in publishing the physical and audio versions of the book. Edit 5. I could have been clearer in the original post. I'm not suggesting that publishers should be required to offer audiobooks at a discount. I'm simply questioning whether this kind of pricing structure could benefit both consumers and publishers. Opinion 24. Just like sex education, religion should only be introduced to children after they have reached a certain age and level of maturity. Let me be clear. I know this cannot and should not be imposed by any government or law. I am simply proposing it as a guideline for current and future parents. My arguments are as follows. Children in their early formative years are not capable of fully rational or informed thinking. Their entire understanding of the world is shaped by what their parents tell them. If you tell a child that the earth is shaped like an upside-down ice cream cone and the sun sits at the tip of it, they will believe you. More than that, it will become their reality. As adults, our religious beliefs can strongly influence the lives we lead. They may affect the partner we choose, the people we associate with, the way we vote, and the direction we take in life. Ideally, religion would not influence these things so heavily, but we do not live in an ideal world. Given the enormous impact religious beliefs can have, it seems unfair to have one rigid and unquestionable doctrine deeply ingrained during childhood. Religion should be a personal choice, just like hobbies, friendships, and career paths. Some may argue that many people were raised religiously and later grew out of it, or changed their beliefs as they matured and expanded their horizons. But I do not consider that a convincing argument. For every person who changes or abandons their religion, there is another whose strict or orthodox upbringing continues to shape them as adults, with or without their conscious awareness. This next point may apply only to a small group of parents, but I still think it is worth mentioning. Some parents use religion as a tool to help raise their children. By that, I mean that God becomes the ultimate metaphorical reward and punishment system, an all-powerful figure constantly watching and judging. Teach children not to steal because stealing is wrong, not because God is watching them. Teach children to help the poor because it is the right thing to do, not because it may help them get into heaven. I am not trying to tell parents how to raise their children, but I am speaking partly from personal experience. The core of my argument is this. Religion can be a beautiful thing when it is understood and practiced in a healthy and meaningful way. But when it is not, it can become harmful and cause suffering for both the individual and others around them. Because of that, I believe religion should be introduced carefully, and only once children are mature enough to understand its meaning and purpose. Opinion 25. It is not unethical for me to pirate a game that I have already paid for on another platform. Paying full price for a game on one platform should give me the ability to play it on another platform as well. I am not buying a physical product. I am paying for the right to play the game. Because of that, I should be able to access the game on another platform without having to purchase it all over again. Paying twice to play the same game on two different platforms does not feel fair. For example, I can play the game on two different PlayStation consoles after paying $79.99 once. But if I want to play it once on PlayStation and once on PC, I'm expected to pay $159.98 in total. Some Windows games already allow cross-platform licenses, which I consider to be the more ethical approach. From a fairness standpoint, that system makes much more sense. Requiring players to pay full price again just to access the same game on another platform feels unethical to me, and because of that, I initially felt that pirating the second copy was morally acceptable. Edit. View changed. Thanks to everyone for the discussion. Consider my view change. I had not fully considered factors such as platform hosting rights, distribution agreements, and the additional costs involved with supporting games across multiple platforms. I also realized that, while I may not want to pay full price for a second copy, it is still unreasonable to assume that no compensation should be required at all. At the end of the day, whether cross-platform ownership is offered is ultimately the developer's decision, not. Opinion 26. It should be illegal for companies to advertise job openings without clearly stating the salary. This should be a basic requirement of the employer-employee relationship. The employer should state how much they are willing to pay for a position, and applicants can then decide whether they're willing to do that job for the offered compensation. There should not be this nonsense where companies either hide the salary entirely or make applicants dig through endless pages just to find out how much the position pays. Employees often have to take time off work or give up part of their weekend to go through the hiring process. That process can include lengthy applications, full work histories, references, background paperwork, orientations, and multiple interviews. People deserve to know what compensation they're signing up for before investing all that time and effort. Making someone go through all that only to say, "We're offering a few dollars above minimum wage and it's non-negotiable," should honestly be considered unacceptable. Opinion 27. The majority of government economic disaster relief funds should go directly to consumers, not corporations. Whenever there's a major economic disaster, as opposed to a natural disaster, financial fear can spread quickly and cause consumers to reduce spending. Cash flow dries up, and the economy slows to a halt. Governments can help restart the economy by appropriating funds and injecting liquidity, which acts like financial grease. Most relief funding should go directly to individuals and families, not corporations, although there are some exceptions. Here's why. It is far more efficient to stabilize an economy by helping consumers than by giving the same amount of money directly to corporations. Consumers will spend money where they need it most, which encourages companies to meet those demands efficiently. For example, imagine there are two farms. One farm raises chickens and produces eggs, while the other produces artisanal cheese made from the rare milk of wild, grass-fed Siberian goats. If you give 10 families $20 each, They will likely spend most of that money on chickens and eggs from the first farm. But if you instead give each farm $100 directly, the farm producing the goods that are most needed may not receive the support required to expand operations, hire additional workers, and better serve the community. Exceptions may exist. Certain industries may need targeted assistance for health or safety reasons rather than simple convenience. Hospitals are one example where a reasonable argument can be made that their financial stability serves the public good. Give relief funds directly to consumers and allow them to direct that money toward the products and services they value most. The money will still flow to businesses and corporations, but this approach preserves market efficiency while still achieving the intended economic results. Opinion 29. It is not unethical for me to pirate a game that I have already paid for on another platform. Paying full price for a game on one platform should give me the ability to play it on another platform as well. I am not buying a physical product. I am paying for the right to play the game. Because of that, I should be able to access a game on another platform without having to purchase it all over again. Paying twice to play the same game on two different platforms does not feel fair. For example, I can play the game on two different PlayStation consoles after paying $79.99 once. But if I want to play it once on PlayStation and once on PC, I am expected to pay $159.98 in total. Some Windows games already allow cross-platform licenses, which I consider to be the more ethical approach. From a fairness standpoint, that system makes much more sense. Requiring players to pay full price again just to access the same game on another platform feels unethical to me, and because of that, I initially felt that pirating the second copy was morally acceptable. Edit. View changed. Thanks to everyone for the discussion. Consider my view changed. I had not fully considered factors such as platform hosting rights, distribution agreements, and the additional costs involved with supporting games across multiple platforms. I also realized that, while I may not want to pay full price for a second copy, it is still unreasonable to assume that no compensation should be required at all. At the end of the day, whether cross-platform ownership is offered is ultimately the developer's decision, not an entitlement I automatically have as a customer. Opinion 30. Voluntary hysterectomy should be available upon request for any adult woman, regardless of medical necessity. A hysterectomy removes a uterus. I think this should change. Why? Having a uterus is actively inconvenient and can sometimes be harmful to a woman's quality of life. When a woman does not plan on having children, it can become a pointless inconvenience as well. It is expensive. If a woman has painful period cramps, she will need pain medication every month. That is not cheap, regardless of pain level. She will also need products to absorb menstrual blood, which is also not cheap. Considering that the average woman has periods for about 12 weeks per year for 30 to 40 years of her life, the total cost adds up to thousands of dollars. No birth control method is 100% guaranteed, except this one. Even procedures like vasectomies and tubal ligations can, in rare cases, fail or reverse themselves. The global situation regarding women's reproductive freedom is also worsening. Why should a woman not be able to guarantee that she will never be forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy? No procedure is guaranteed to stop menstruation or period cramps except this one. Now, some common counterarguments I have heard, and why I disagree with them. Hysterectomies are too invasive, so they should only be performed if the woman's life is at risk. We allow elective plastic surgery, which carries similar risks from general anesthesia and infection. Doctors also prescribe hormonal birth control for 30-plus years. These hormones carry cumulative risks, including blood clots, strokes, and mood disorders. Why is a one-time surgical risk considered extreme, while a lifelong chemical risk is considered standard care? Removing the uterus could cause pelvic floor issues or early menopause. Keeping the uterus carries a lifetime risk of cervical cancer, endometrial cancer, fibroids, adenomyosis, and endometriosis. Both keeping and removing the uterus involve risks. There is no certainty about which outcomes will occur. We already allow other risky surgeries for less serious reasons. What if the woman regrets it? Tattoos are permanent, and we allow adults to get them. Tubal ligation is also treated as permanent, and it is allowed. If a woman is an adult and understands the risks, she should be allowed to make this decision. Still, I am open to changing my view. So, why do you think a woman should not be able to remove this organ from her body if she wants to? Opinion 31. You cannot tell women to choose better men, and then also get angry at women for having high standards. These red pill talking points contradict each other. I see a lot of people talk about the male loneliness epidemic, and some of those same advocates are also the ones who try to hold women accountable for being single mothers and not choosing better partners. You cannot have both. Either women stay single because there are not enough good men out there and maintain high standards, or they lower the bar and date immature or abusive men. You cannot have it both ways. Speaking as a man who was quite immature and went down the red pill pipeline myself. Edit. I forgot to include the financial side of choosing better. Women end up stuck either way. If they choose badly, for example, men who are unemployed, broke, or have criminal records, and become single mothers, they are blamed. But if they avoid those men and instead choose partners with stable jobs or education, they are accused of being gold diggers. You cannot have it both ways. My apology for not mentioning this nuance earlier. Opinion 32. All guns sold in the U.S. should be hot pink. Pink is invisible to most game, just like orange. A pink gun would be easier to see for everyone involved. It might deter some people from buying guns. It would be completely legal under all interpretations of the Second Amendment that I can find. I am not choosing pink because of any association with feminine traits. It is simply a bright and highly visible color. I would be open to other options, such as neon orange, but I believe there's a valid argument that firearms should be in a color that is clearly visible to humans while remaining less effective as camouflage for deer. The benefits of a single bright standardized color for firearms would be significant. You could even require that all existing firearms be converted to this color. I believe I even remember Penn Jillette suggesting something similar about 20 years ago. What is wrong with this idea? At worst, it would not increase gun violence. At best, it might prevent some incidents. Quick notes. All guns would be required to be pink, including older firearms. Painting a gun a different color would be a felony. Concealed carry. This is not part of my core view, but I would lean toward banning concealed carry and allowing only open carry. Color. I am not strongly attached to pink specifically. I chose it because it is highly visible and may be considered undesirable by some people. I am open to any highly visible or ugly color. I have already awarded a delta on this point. Customization. No. Every surface of the firearm would need to be the same color, with no exceptions for cosmetic modifications. You want mother of pearl grips? Paint them pink. You bought a custom agri-wood stock? Paint it pink. You want stickers on your gun? No. Everything must be pink. This would impact legal gun owners, etc. Yes, that is the point. I am explicitly not trying to focus on criminals. I am trying to change behavior among legal gun owners. If you have a gun in your home, that gun is statistically more likely to kill an innocent person than a criminal. That is what I am trying to address. This wouldn't stop crime, mass shootings, or school shootings. Yes, I understand. That is not my intent. Why not just ban all guns? I have no desire to ban all guns. I own guns myself. I am simply exploring ways to make guns less attractive to casual ownership, as those cases are statistically more likely to lead to dangerous outcomes. FYI, pink is actually my favorite color. Opinion 33. Arguments against universal healthcare are rubbish and lack logical consistency. Okay, before you get triggered by the wording, let's examine a few things. The most common criticism of universal healthcare is, I don't want to pay for your medical bills. This is a flawed argument for a very simple reason. You are already paying insurance. The fundamental principle of insurance is that people collectively pay for other people's problems or losses. To illustrate this using the car insurance industry, if you pay 2,000 euros per year, and your car is damaged in a parking lot, and you receive 8,000 euros to 10,000 euros for repairs, that money comes from a collective pool paid into by other policyholders. In other words, others contributed to cover your loss. This clearly shows that the idea of, I don't want to pay for others, is already how insurance works, and rejecting it is inconsistent. In general, universal healthcare can improve the overall quality of care, assuming, for the sake of argument, that most developed countries have comparable baseline healthcare quality. Most people would receive better access to services. The wealthiest 1% might see slightly reduced exclusivity or speed of service, but they would still be able to pay for private care if they choose. In countries with public healthcare systems, I am from Italy for reference, people can still choose private healthcare, often receiving additional services. This creates a dual system. In some countries, not mine, the public system is underfunded, pushing people toward private care. That is a separate issue. Essential medications and life-saving drugs will become more accessible, and prices could be regulated. Some people require medication to survive, such as insulin for diabetes or treatments for schizophrenia and other chronic conditions. I am not saying these should necessarily be completely free in all systems, but charging $300 for insulin is inhumane. We are not talking about optional treatments or short-term medications. These are lifelong necessities. At minimum, prices should be capped at a reasonable level so that 99% of people can afford them. Universal healthcare would also result in a healthier population overall. Many people avoid going to doctors simply because of cost or because they fear financial ruin. This can delay diagnosis and treatment of serious conditions that could have been managed if caught early. When people are not afraid of cost, they are more likely to seek timely medical care. Another common argument is, I don't want to wait 8 months for surgery. This is largely inaccurate. In most systems, urgent cases are treated immediately. For example, I once tore my ACL and meniscus. It was very painful and I could barely walk. I had surgery within 2 weeks and stayed in the hospital for 3 nights, with food included, and I paid €0. Of course, for minor, non-urgent issues, waiting times can be longer, sometimes 1 or 2 months. But those are not life-threatening conditions. Meanwhile, my father was diagnosed with cancer and hospitalized immediately, without even waiting 2 hours for evaluation or admission. Edit. Thank you all for your comments. I will try to read them all, although it may take some time.